I'm Lila Harper, the sister nobody sees, but tonight I'm a shadow with a storm inside. The Charleston alley reeks of damp moss and forgotten promises, its fog swallowing the streetlight's glow. My heart pounds as I press against the bank's cold brick wall, Nora's voice slicing through the mist. Find her. She can't hide forever. Her heels echo closer, hunting me after I slipped out with the folio that could end her. My grandfather's woven bracelet digs into my wrist, grounding me. They think I'm weak, but I hold their world in my hands. One wrong move, and it all crumbles. What happens when a nobody becomes everything? Hope you enjoyed this story. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear where you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. I pulled my coat tighter, the damp wool scratching against my neck as I stepped away from the bank's towering glass doors. The Charleston air smelled of salt and marsh, a reminder of the low country's stubborn beauty, but tonight it felt like a warning. My boots made no sound on the wet pavement, each step deliberate, as if I could outrun the humiliation still burning in my chest. I wasn't here for myself. I never was. Ms. Jenkins, my neighbor, had asked for $100 to tide her over until Friday. Her hands had trembled when she opened her near-empty fridge, her smile too bright to hide the hunger. $100. That's all I needed. But Nora, my own sister, turned it into a spectacle. The bank's lobby had been all polish and pretense, marble floors gleaming under fluorescent lights, the faint scent of eucalyptus masking the sterile chill. I'd stood in line, my faded jeans and twice-stitched coat drawing glances from men in tailored suits and women with perfect manicures. I didn't care. I'd learned long ago to carry myself tall, to let their eyes slide off me like water. But then Nora appeared, her winter-white blazer pristine, her smile sharp as a shard of glass. "Lila," she'd said, loud enough for the whole line to hear. "Still using this branch, are we?" Her tone was syrupy, but her eyes glinted with something meaner. "We don't really serve walk-ins anymore, especially not beggars." The word landed like a slap, echoing in the cathedral-like silence of the lobby. A man in a navy suit glanced up from his phone. An older woman by the window turned her head. My face burned, but I didn't flinch. I'd faced Nora's cruelty before. Family dinners where she'd laugh off my dreams. Christmas parties where she'd call me a soft-spoken parasite while our mother, Margaret, looked away. But this was public, deliberate, a performance for an audience of strangers. I touched the bracelet on my wrist, its fibers worn but familiar. A gift from Grandpa before he passed. "You're the one they'll never see coming," he'd told me once, his voice rough with pride. I nodded at Nora, not because I agreed, but because I'd learned silence speaks louder than shouting. I stepped out of line, my boots silent on the marble, and walked past her without a word. Outside, the rain had softened to a drizzle, the kind that clings to your skin like regret. My reflection lingered in the bank's glass doors, head high, eyes steady, the woman Nora thought she could break. I didn't cry. Not anymore. But as I walked down Meeting Street, the weight of that moment settled in my bones. $100 for Ms. Jenkins wasn't just money. It was dignity. A small act of defiance against a world that keeps people like her invisible. And Nora had turned it into a weapon. Back in my apartment, the air smelled of jasmine tea and old books, my kind of peace. I hung my coat by the door, the bracelet catching the dim light from a single lamp. My place was small, a creaky radiator, a dining table that doubled as a desk, but it was mine, earned without anyone's charity. I slid my laptop from under the couch cushion, its edges worn smooth from years of use. The screen flickered twice before settling, and I typed my passphrase with steady fingers. Foxglove never forgets. A soft ping. One encrypted message, expected. I read it twice, then closed the lid. My heart didn't race. It slowed, deliberate, like it knew what was coming. I wasn't just Lila Harper, the sister Nora mocked. I was M. Wren, architect of Tideshell Holdings, a financial empire no one in my family knew existed. Years ago, when Nora laughed at my fintech internship dreams, I'd walked away, not in shame, but in strategy. With Ray, my old partner, I'd built a security protocol so airtight it made headlines without ever naming us. We'd registered Tideshell through 5 countries, each layer a wall of anonymity. By year 2, I held the majority stake, hidden behind fiduciary shadows. Nora's bank had been chasing our liquidity for years, and last quarter they'd finally won a piece, signed by Nora herself, clueless that she was signing under me. I sipped my tea, the steam curling like a secret. Nora thought she'd humiliated me today, but she'd only lit the fuse. I reached for my phone and dialed a number no one in that bank would ever know I had. "Hey," I said, voice calm. "It's Lila. I need a favor." The line crackled and I smiled. Not the kind you show the world, but the kind you feel when a plan clicks into place. Tomorrow I'd walk back into that bank, not for $100, but for everything. And Nora? She'd learn what my silence really meant. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who should have known better? Drop a comment below. I read everyone. What would you do if you held the power to turn the tables? The jasmine tea had gone cold in my mug, its steam long faded, but I didn't mind. My apartment was quiet, save for the hum of the radiator and the distant patter of Charleston's evening drizzle against the window. I sat at my small dining table, the laptop's glow casting shadows across the room, its worn edges a testament to years of secrets. The encrypted message from Ray still blinked on the screen. "You sure about this, Ren?" I traced the woven bracelet on my wrist. Grandpa's gift. Its threads frayed but holding strong. "You always knew," I whispered, as if he could hear me from wherever he was now. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, then typed, "It's time." I hit send, and the ping felt like a heartbeat. This wasn't just about Nora's cruelty in the bank today, though her words, "We don't serve charity cases, Lila," still stung like salt in a wound. It was about every time she'd laughed at my dreams, every family gathering where I'd been the invisible sister, the one who didn't fit into their polished world of Charleston's elite. I leaned back, the chair creaking under me, and closed my eyes. A memory flickered, sharp and vivid, like a Polaroid pulled from a dusty box. It was a low country boil, years ago, the air thick with shrimp and Old Bay, the harbour breeze carrying laughter from our family's King Street estate. I was 19, fresh from a summer internship at a fintech startup, my head buzzing with ideas about secure transaction protocols. I'd tried to share them at the table, my voice shaky but earnest. Nora had cut me off with a laugh, her wineglass glinting under the string lights. "Lila, sweetheart, the world doesn't need another dreamer. Stick to something practical, like marrying well." Our mother, Margaret, had looked down at her plate, her silence louder than Nora's words. Jim, Nora's husband, had chuckled, and the rest of the table followed, their laughter a wall I couldn't climb. I opened my eyes, the memory fading but leaving a familiar ache. That night I'd walked home alone, the cobblestones slick under my sneakers, promising myself I'd build something they couldn't touch. And I did. Tideshell Holdings was my answer, born in the quiet hours when no one was watching. Ray and I had coded the first prototype in a cramped Boston dorm, fueled by cheap coffee and a shared hatred of systems that let the powerful skate by. By the time I was 25, Tideshell was a shadow empire, moving billions through layers of encrypted trusts, untouchable and untraceable. I was Emma Wren, a name I'd chosen after nursing a wounded bird back to health on an Arizona foster farm. A nod to the girl who'd always been underestimated but never broken. The laptop pinged again. Ray's reply, "Done. Access granted. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. You're calling the shots." I exhaled. A slow breath that felt like shedding a skin. Nora's bank had been chasing Tideshell's liquidity for years, and last quarter, they'd landed a piece. $3.5 billion to be exact. Nora had signed the contract herself, oblivious that M. Wren was me. Tomorrow I'd walk back into her bank, not as Lila Harper, the sister she mocked, but as the woman who held her world in her hands. I stood crossing to the window where Charleston's skyline shimmered through the rain. The city felt alive, its pulse matching mine. I wasn't just fighting for me. I was fighting for Ms. Jenkins, for every person Nora's world dismissed. Have you ever held a secret so big it could change everything? Drop a comment below. I want to know what you do with that kind of power. The next evening, the air in Charleston carried a heavier chill, the kind that settles into your bones and makes you question every choice. I hadn't slept much, my mind replaying Nora's smirk, the way her heels had clicked like a countdown in the bank's lobby. I stood outside our family's King Street estate, its wrought iron gates looming like a judgment. The mansion's windows glowed, casting warm light onto the cobblestones. But I felt no warmth. I hadn't been invited to tonight's dinner, Nora's latest show for Charleston's elite. But I wasn't here to crash it. Not yet. A letter had arrived that morning, slipped under my apartment door, its handwriting unmistakable. Hank Grayson, my grandfather's old friend, a lawyer who'd always treated me like I mattered. His note was brief but heavy. The Coastal Legacy Trust is yours, Lila. Always was. Come see me. I tucked it into my coat pocket, my fingers brushing the woven bracelet. I needed answers before I faced Nora again. The estate smelled of rosemary and wealth, the kind of place where every vase and chandelier screamed old money. I slipped around the side, avoiding the front door where Nora's guests would be arriving, their laughter already spilling into the night. Inside the dining room was a stage, Nora at the head of the table, her winter white dress glowing under the pendant lights, charming a room of investors with her practiced smile. Jim leaned in beside her, his investor grin as fake as ever. Margaret sat at the far end, her pearl necklace catching the light, her face unreadable. I stayed in the shadows of the garden, watching through the tall windows, my breath fogging the glass. A cousin from Savannah mentioned my name, something about seeing me downtown, and Nora's laugh cut through the air. Lila? Oh, she's probably off chasing her little dreams, she said, her voice dripping with pity. The table chuckled, but Margaret's hands tightened around her napkin. A flicker of something, guilt maybe, crossing her face. I turned away, the letter in my pocket feeling heavier. Hank's office was a short walk, tucked in a quiet corner of East Bay Street. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening, the air thick with the scent of wet magnolias. Hank's office was small, cluttered with legal books and framed photos of him and Grandpa, their smiles frozen in a time when I still felt like I belonged. He greeted me with a nod, his silver hair catching the lamplight. Lila, he said, his voice rough but warm. You've been carrying a lot, haven't you? He slid a folder across his desk, its pages yellowed but official. The Coastal Legacy Trust, signed by Grandpa in 1954, named me as the beneficiary. Not Nora, not Margaret, me. Your grandfather knew you'd build something real, Hank said. He made sure you'd have the power to protect it. My throat tightened. I'd always thought Grandpa's trust was a myth, something Nora and Jim had dismissed as dissolved after he passed. But here it was, real and mine, controlling assets Nora's bank had been siphoning for years. I traced the signature on the document, Grandpa's steady hand, and remembered his voice. Your heart's your vault, Lila. Don't let them steal it. Hank leaned forward. Nora's been profiting off your inheritance, Lila. She doesn't know you hold the keys. I nodded, my mind racing. Tomorrow's bank visit wasn't just about the $3.5 billion. It was about reclaiming what was mine. As I left Hank's office, the Charleston skyline loomed, its lights sharp against the night. Nora thought she'd buried me, but she'd only buried herself. Back in my apartment, I sat with the folder, its weight grounding me. Clara, the young teller from the bank, had slipped me a note today, tucked into a receipt. I saw what Nora did. I'm sorry. Her handwriting was shaky, like she'd risked something to write it. I didn't know her well, but her quiet defiance felt like an echo of my own. Maybe she saw something in me, a spark, a fight, that Nora never would. I set the folder down, my bracelet catching the light. Tomorrow I'd walk into that bank with more than a withdrawal slip. I'd walk in with the truth. Have you ever found a piece of your past that changed your future? Share your story in the comments. I'm reading every one. The Charleston morning was sharp, the kind of crisp that cuts through your coat and makes you feel every nerve. I stood outside the Charleston Coastal Trust Bank, my breath visible in the autumn air, the cobblestones still damp from last night's drizzle. My hand gripped a sleek black folio, its edges cool against my fingers. Tideshell Holdings logo embossed discreetly on the cover. Nora's words from yesterday, "We don't serve charity cases, Lila," echoed in my head, but they didn't sting anymore. They were fuel. I adjusted my grandfather's woven bracelet, its frayed threads a quiet reminder of who I was. Today, I wasn't here for $100. I was here to take back everything. The bank's glass doors loomed, reflecting a woman I barely recognized. Head high, eyes steady, ready to make the room go cold. I pushed through the doors, the lobby's eucalyptus scent hitting me like a sanitized slap. The marble floors gleamed, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows. Clients in tailored suits moved like they owned the place, but I felt the weight of something heavier: power. Clara, the young teller, glanced up from her station, her eyes widening for a split second before she looked away. I stepped to the counter, sliding the folio toward her. "I have an appointment," I said softly. "It's under Tideshell Holdings." Her fingers hesitated, then scanned the QR code inside the folio. The screen blinked red, and her face froze. "I'll need the manager," she stammered, already reaching for the phone. Nora appeared like a storm cloud in heels, her winter white blazer pristine, her smile a practiced mask. "What are you doing here, Lila?" she hissed, her voice low but sharp enough to cut. "I told you yesterday, we're not a charity." I didn't reply, just watched as she snatched the folio from Clara's hands. "Enough," she snapped. "Let's see what my little sister thinks she's playing at." She flipped through the papers, her smirk fading with each page. Her eyes froze, her breath catching as she read the account details. Tideshell Holdings, primary withdrawal request, $3.5 billion. She looked up, her face pale. This can't be real." The branch manager, a tall man with silver hair named Mr. Ellison, arrived, his calm demeanor betraying a flicker of unease. He took the folio, typed something into his terminal, and stopped. "This is a VIP-level authorization," he said, his voice low. "Shellcode Holdings, primary withdrawal flagged as sensitive." He glanced at Nora. "You're listed as an employee in a partnered entity. Did you know?" The lobby went quiet, the kind of silence that feels like the air's been sucked out. A junior banker dropped her pen. Clara's hands trembled at her station. Nora backed up, her heels unsteady. "It can't be," she whispered. "It's real," I said, meeting her eyes. "You've been working for me, Nora. Indirectly, of course. All these years, laughing behind my back." The system chimed and Ellison read from his screen. "Withdrawal authorized. Amount requested, $3.5 billion. Confirmed entity signature. Lockdown initiated for audit compliance." The front doors locked with a click. Nora's mouth opened, but no words came. Then, like something inside her cracked, she stumbled forward and dropped to her knees. "Lila," she whispered, eyes wide, almost pleading. "Don't do this. Don't ruin everything. I have a child, a career." I tilted my head, my voice steady. "You ruined yourself, Nora. All I did was step back and let you." Someone gasped behind a cubicle. Ellison didn't intervene, just nodded to his assistant, who was already calling the executive suite. Nora shook her head, mascara smudging under her eyes. "You're my sister," she said, her voice breaking. "Am I?" asked. "You made it clear I wasn't family long ago." The silence that followed was heavy, like the moment before a storm breaks. I turned to Ellison. "I'd like to speak to someone from the executive suite, privately." He nodded, pressing a button for the internal elevator. As I walked away, the folio tucked under my arm, I didn't look back at Nora, still frozen on the floor. The elevator doors slid shut, and the silence behind me said everything had just changed. Have you ever faced someone who betrayed you and come out stronger? Drop a comment below. I read every one. What would you do if you held the key to their world? The news of the bank's lockdown spread like wildfire through Charleston's tight-knit financial circles. By noon, my phone was buzzing. Nora, Jim, even Margaret. Their voicemails piling up like debts they couldn't pay. I didn't listen. I sat in my apartment. The jasmine tea I'd brewed gone cold again. The folio open on my table. The Coastal Legacy Trust papers from Hank lay beside it, their yellowed edges a reminder of Grandpa's faith in me. He'd known I'd need this one day, a shield against a family that saw me as less. But as I traced his signature, a flicker of doubt crept in. Was I doing this for justice, or was I becoming the thing I hated? Someone who wields power to wound. I pushed the thought away and stepped onto my balcony, the Charleston skyline hazy under a grey sky. The city smelled of wet leaves and distant sea, a mix of old and new that felt like home, even when my family didn't. My phone buzzed again, Jim this time, his name flashing like a warning. I let it go to voicemail. imagining his smooth-talking investor voice trying to spin this in his favor. He'd always been Nora's shadow, chasing status while pretending to care. Margaret's call came next, her number a ghost from a past I'd tried to forget. I didn't answer, but her silence in that bank lobby yesterday lingered, heavier than any words. I needed air, clarity, so I walked to a cafe on Meeting Street, its wooden tables scarred from years of locals and tourists. I ordered a coffee, black, and sat by the window, watching the drizzle start again. That's when they found me, Nora, Jim, and Margaret. Their faces a mix of panic and pretense. Nora slid into the seat across from me, her makeup flawless but her eyes red-rimmed. "Lila," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard. "Can we talk?" Jim hovered behind her, his tie slightly askew, while Margaret sat at the edge, her hands clasped tight. I sipped my coffee, letting the silence stretch. "Talk," I said finally, "but don't expect me to make this easy." Nora leaned forward, her voice low. "What happened at the bank? I didn't mean it to go that far. You know how it is. Pressure, image. I have a daughter to think about." Jim nodded, his smile forced. "We're family, Lila. We can work this out. No need to escalate." Margaret said nothing, her eyes fixed on her hands, but I saw the tremble in her fingers, the same one I'd noticed at family dinners when she'd let Nora's barbs fly. I set my cup down, the clink loud in the quiet. "Family?" I said. "You stopped being that when you laughed me out of every room I tried to stand in." Nora flinched, but Jim jumped in. "Look, we didn't know about Tideshell, okay? You kept that from us. How were we supposed to—" I cut him off. "You didn't need to know. You needed to see me." Margaret finally spoke, her voice thin. "Lila, I should have done better. After your father died, things were hard. I thought Nora's way was stability. I looked at her, the woman who'd raised me but never fought for me. Stability, I said, shouldn't mean erasing your own daughter." The cafe felt smaller, the air thick with their excuses. I stood, leaving my coffee half finished. "I'll come to the family dinner," I said, my voice steady, "but only to see who shows up." Nora's face fell, and Jim's jaw tightened, but Margaret's eyes followed me as I walked out. Back on the street, the drizzle kissed my face, and I felt a spark of something new. Not anger, but resolve. Clara's note from yesterday flashed in my mind. "I'm sorry." She'd seen Nora's cruelty, and her quiet support felt like a lifeline. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. I pulled out my phone and texted Hank. "Dinner's tomorrow. I'm ready." His reply came fast. "You've always been ready, kid." The Charleston sky darkened, the harbor's hum a steady pulse. Nora thought she could charm her way out of this, but I was done playing her game. Tomorrow I'd bring the truth to that table, and they'd see what my silence had built. Have you ever walked into a room knowing you'd change it forever? Share your story in the comments. I want to hear it. The air in the historic Charleston restaurant was thick with the scent of rosemary and fresh linens, but it couldn't mask the tension coiling around the long table. I sat at the head, my hands steady on the polished mahogany, the woven bracelet on my wrist catching the warm glow of the pendant light above. The sign on the centerpiece read, "Reserved," a word that felt like a reclaimed promise. Nora sat across from me, her Chanel earrings glinting, her smile too tight to pass for genuine. Jim hovered beside her, his investor grin plastered on like a bad habit. Margaret at the far end clutched her chamomile tea, her pearl necklace of fragile armor. Relatives filled the seats, cousins from Savannah, an uncle from Columbia, their chatter fading as I stood. "If I may," I said, my voice soft but clear, "I'd like to make a withdrawal of the truth." Nora's laugh was brittle, a reflex she couldn't stop. "Lila, if this is some dramatic cry for attention—" I cut her off, sliding a thick black folder onto the table, its pages heavy with evidence. "No, Nora, this is documentation, not drama." The room stilled, forks pausing mid-air. I opened the folder, my fingers deliberate. First, the Coastal Legacy Trust, signed by our father, equal distribution between his daughters. I held up a copy, the ink faded but unmistakable. Then the forged amendment, dated 2 weeks before his stroke. I passed around a notarized stamp, the date glaring. Whispers rippled through the table. I continued, voice steady. Next, the Oregon vineyard, reallocated to an offshore account under Nora's shell company. Gasps followed, sharp and quick. And the Educational Endowment for Women in STEM, repurposed for Nora's real estate ventures, authorized by Margaret's signature. Nora's lip twitched. "Mother gave me permission," she snapped. "You don't know everything, Lila." I met her gaze. The date on that authorization, the same day Mother was in surgery in Zurich. Heads turned, eyes narrowing. Margaret's teacup rattled in its saucer, her hands trembling. I plugged a USB drive into a cousin's laptop, the screen flickering to life behind me. Transaction logs, timelines, emails. Nothing flashy, just truth. Nora's voice cracked. "You always needed to be the victim, didn't you?" I turned to her, calm but unyielding. "No, Nora, I just wanted to be seen. You wanted to erase me." Jim stood, his face red. "Lila, this is family business. You can't just—" I silenced him with a look. "Family? You laughed when Nora called me a parasite at Grandpa's funeral." A cousin coughed into his napkin. An aunt from Beaufort excused herself, her chair scraping the floor. Nora gripped her champagne flute, her knuckles white. "You're jealous," she spat. "You always have been." But the room wasn't hers anymore. Our uncle muttered, "Disgraceful," and headed for the door. Margaret stayed silent, her eyes fixed on her plate, listening to something older than any voice here. I placed one final document on the table, a letter from Margaret to the family lawyer, retracting her consent to the transfers, dated 6 weeks ago. "This house has 2 doors," I said, closing the folder. "Today I walk out the one you didn't build." I left the folder on the table, Nora's throne, and walked away, my steps deliberate. Outside, the Charleston air hit me like a clean slate, the sea breeze carrying the scent of salt and possibility. I was halfway to the corner when Nora's voice called out, sharp and desperate. "You're not selling the trust, are you?" I didn't turn back. My silence was louder than her fear. "Have you ever exposed a truth that changed everything? Drop a comment below. I want to hear your story." The rain started just as I reached my apartment, its soft tapping against the tall windows like a confession waiting to be heard. I slipped off my coat, the woven bracelet catching the dim light of my single lamp. The quiet was my refuge, the hum of the radiator a steady pulse. I was reaching for a blanket when I saw it. An envelope slid under my door. No knock, no footsteps, just there, like it had always belonged. The handwriting was unmistakable. Margaret's neat and sharp, the kind that said everything was under control, even when it wasn't. I stared at it, my fingers hovering. After years of her silence, her words felt like a trap, each letter a potential razor. But I couldn't walk away, not yet. I sat on the couch, peeling the envelope open with slow fingers. The paper was crisp, the ink black and deliberate, no crossings out, no hesitation. "Lila," it began. "No, my darling or sweetheart, just my name, raw and unadorned. There's something I've carried for too long, something I should have told you before it got this far." Her words pulled me back to a summer when I was 10, the Charleston heat thick enough to choke. I'd set up a lemonade stand at the end of our driveway, my posters hand-drawn, my sugar packets counted one by one. I'd been so proud, dreaming of coin jars and break-even charts. But Nora, 12 and already sharp, had accidentally spilled the jug before my first sale. I'd cried, not understanding why she'd done it. I thought she just hated lemonade. Margaret's letter told a different story. "I saw what she did," she wrote. "I knew it wasn't an accident, but I didn't know how to protect both of you, and in the end, I protected neither." She wrote of Grandpa's passing, how the family's finances crumbled overnight. Jim had offered stability, she said, in exchange for supporting Nora's fast-tracked career, her early grip on decisions that should have been mine. They made it look like security, but it was control, and I allowed it. My hands grew cold, colder than the window pane beside me. All these years, I'd thought her silence was a choice, a rejection. But maybe it was survival, not just for her, but for me. She didn't ask for forgiveness. "I'm not writing this for absolution," she ended. "I'm asking you to break the pattern. Don't become what hurt you." I sat there, the rain louder now, the letter open in my lap. No tears, No dramatic exhale, just the crackle of paper and the weight of her words. I stood, crossing to a shelf where I kept pieces of my childhood, a small box behind old photo frames. Inside was a blue ledger notebook, creased and dusty, filled with a 10-year-old's business plans for lemonade and kindness. Tucked between the pages was a sticky note, my childish scrawl. One day, I'll have a big vault, and I won't leave anyone out. That girl didn't know what was coming, but she knew what mattered. I set the notebook down, my eyes drifting to a photo of me and Grandpa, his wrench raised like we just fixed the world. "You said I was the one no one saw coming," I whispered. The rain rattled the windows, insistent, like it wanted me to listen. Clara's note from the bank flashed in my mind. "I'm sorry." And I wondered if she'd ever had a mother who let her down too. Maybe that's why she'd reached out, a quiet rebellion against Nora's world. I wasn't sure if I could forgive Margaret, but her letter had cracked something open, a question I wasn't ready to answer. Could I break the pattern without breaking myself? My phone buzzed, a text from Hank. "Boardroom tomorrow 9 a.m. They're waiting." I exhaled, a grin tugging at my lips. Nora had tried to access Tideshell's executive panel today. I'd seen the alert on my laptop. She'd been blocked, of course. Let her wonder. I wasn't done yet. Tomorrow I'd walk into that boardroom, not as the sister they'd erased, but as the woman who'd built an empire they couldn't touch. The Charleston night pressed against my windows, its secrets whispering back. Have you ever held a letter that made you question everything? Share your story in the comments. I'm reading every one. The Charleston morning was heavy with fog, the kind that clings to the cobblestones and muffles the world, making every step feel like a secret. I stood outside the Charleston Coastal Trust Bank, my breath steady, the woven bracelet on my wrist a quiet anchor. The black folio under my arm held more than papers. It held years of silence, now sharpened into something undeniable. Today wasn't about Nora or her pleading knees. It was about claiming what Grandpa had left me, the Coastal Legacy Trust, and rewriting the rules of a world that had counted me out. The glass doors reflected a woman I was starting to know, Lila Harper, not just the sister they mocked, but the one who'd built a vault no one could break. I stepped into the lobby, the eucalyptus scent sharp, the marble floors gleaming under harsh lights. Clara, at her teller station, gave me a small nod, her eyes bright with something like pride. I didn't smile back, not yet, but I felt her gaze like a spark. The elevator ride to the executive suite was silent, the hum of the cables steady as my pulse. When the doors opened, the boardroom waited, its long oak table surrounded by men and women in suits, their faces a mix of curiosity and unease. Mr. Ellison, the branch manager, stood at the head, his silver hair catching the light. "Ms. Harper," he said, gesturing to a seat. I didn't take it. "I prefer to stand," I said, my voice calm but firm, and opened the folio. "I'm here to confirm my authority over the Coastal Legacy Trust," I began, sliding Grandpa's original document across the table, signed in 1954, naming me as primary beneficiary. A murmur rippled through the room. I passed out copies of the forged amendments, Nora's handiwork, exposed at the family dinner last night, and the bank's transaction logs, showing years of misdirected funds. "These assets," I said, "were used to prop up this bank's liquidity without my consent." Ellison's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. I met each board member's eyes, my words deliberate. "From now on, Merit, not nepotism. We'll decide how this trust is managed." Nora wasn't here. She'd been suspended pending an ethics review, a fact Ellison confirmed with a nod. Her absence felt like a ghost in the room, her polished throne empty. I could still see her on her knees begging, but the memory didn't satisfy me. It just made me tired. A woman in a navy blazer, Ms. Patel, spoke up. "Ms. Harper, your claim is unsubstantial. What are your intentions?" I paused, letting the question settle. "To redirect the trust's assets to their intended purpose," I said. "Education, community, women in STEM, starting with a full audit to recover what was taken." The room shifted, some nodding, others scribbling notes. Ellison cleared his throat. "We'll need to comply with the audit. Your authority is clear." I nodded, closing the folio. "Good. I expect transparency." As I turned to leave, A man in a grey suit, Mr. Langston, I'd later learn, stood. Ms. Harper, your sister's actions, they don't reflect this board. I looked at him, my voice low. They reflect a system that let her. Fix it. The elevator doors closed behind me, and the weight of the room lifted. I'd done what I came for, not for revenge, but for truth. Outside, the fog was thinning, Charleston's skyline peeking through. Hank was waiting by the curb, his old pickup truck idling. You did good, kid, he said, his smile crinkling his eyes. I climbed in, the leather seat creaking. Grandpa would have been proud, he added, handing me a thermos of coffee. I took a sip, the warmth spreading. He taught me to stand tall, I said. Hank nodded, his voice soft. He knew you'd outshine them all. As we drove through the city, the harbour's salt air filled my lungs, and I felt something new. Not victory, but possibility. Have you ever claimed a piece of your legacy and felt it change you? Drop a comment below. I'm reading every one. The Charleston afternoon was soft, the kind of light that paints the world in gold and makes you believe in second chances. I stood in the new office of my nonprofit, a converted warehouse on East Bay Street, its exposed brick walls still smelling of fresh paint. The space was bare, wooden floors, a few folding chairs, a desk cluttered with blueprints for what it could become. I traced the woven bracelet on my wrist, Grandpa's gift, and felt him here, somehow, in the quiet. This wasn't just an office, it was a promise, a place to build what Nora and her world had tried to bury. Women in STEM, community programs, scholarships for girls like Clara. A vault for dreams, not dollars. I crossed to a shelf where I'd unpacked a box of Grandpa's old things, keepsakes Hank had saved for me. Among them was a savings book, its leather cover cracked but intact. I flipped it open, expecting faded numbers, but found a note tucked inside. Grandpa's handwriting bold and sure. Lila, use your heart when they forget who you are. My throat tightened. He'd written it years ago, maybe when I was still selling lemonade, dreaming of jars full of coins. I held the note, its edges soft, and whispered, I'm trying, Grandpa. The words felt like a vow. My phone buzzed, pulling me back. A news alert. Charleston bank scandal. Manager suspended amid fraud allegations. Amelia Brooks, the journalist I'd seen at the restaurant, had broken the story. Her article laid it bare. Nora's offshore accounts, the forged trust amendments, the bank's complicity. It was viral, shared across Charleston's social media, with comments calling for justice. I didn't read them. I didn't need to. Amelia had done her part, amplifying a truth I'd already set free. But her final line stuck with me. At the center of this storm is a woman who refused to be silenced. I wasn't sure if I felt like a hero or just someone who'd stopped running. Clara texted me, her message short but bright. Just enrolled in a coding boot camp. Thank you for showing me what's possible. I smiled, picturing her at the bank, her hands no longer trembling. She'd seen me stand up to Nora, and now she was standing up for herself. I typed back, You're gonna crush it. Her reply came fast, a heart emoji, simple but enough. Clara was proof that ripples matter, that one person's fight can light a spark in someone else. I tucked my phone away, the savings book still in my hand. Grandpa's note wasn't just a message, it was a map, guiding me towards something bigger than revenge. Margaret's letter, the one I'd found under my door, sat on my desk, unopened since last night. I hadn't answered her calls, hadn't read her voicemails, but I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. Her words, I'm asking you to break the pattern, kept circling in my head, a challenge I wasn't ready to face. I set the savings book down and picked up the letter, my fingers hesitating. Could I let her in without losing myself? The question felt too big, like the Charleston harbor stretching beyond the horizon. I slipped the letter into my bag, not ready to answer, but not ready to let it go. A knock at the door startled me. Hank stood there, his coat dusted with sawdust from helping set up the office. Got a minute? He asked. I nodded, and he handed me a folder. Your nonprofit's first grant application, approved, enough to fund 10 scholarships this year. My breath caught. Already? He grinned. You move fast, kid. So does the world when it sees you. I flipped through the papers, my heart swelling. This was real, tangible, not just a dream. I looked at Hank. his eyes crinkling like Grandpa's used to. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick. He waved it off. "Just keep building." As he left, the Charleston sky deepened, the first stars peeking through. My phone buzzed again, another voicemail from Margaret. I didn't listen, but I kept the phone close, its weight a reminder of choices still unmade. Tomorrow I'd meet with Amelia, who'd asked for an interview. I wasn't sure what I'd say, but I knew I wouldn't hide. Nora's world was crumbling and mine was rising. I touched Grandpa's note one last time, its words my compass. Have you ever found a note that reminded you who you are? Share your story in the comments. I want to hear it. The Charleston dawn broke soft and golden, painting the Battery's ancient oaks with light that felt like a promise. I walked along the seawall, the harbor's salt breeze tangling my hair, the woven bracelet on my wrist catching the sun's first rays. My boots tapped against the uneven stones, a steady rhythm that matched my pulse. This city, its cobblestones, its marsh-scented air, had been my cage and my canvas, a place where I'd been broken and rebuilt. Today it felt like home, not because of Nora or Margaret or the family I'd once chased, but because I'd chosen it. I'd chosen me. My nonprofit's office on East Bay Street hummed with life now, its brick walls lined with posters for coding boot camps and STEM scholarships. Clara had stopped by yesterday, her eyes bright as she showed me her first Python project, a simple app, but hers, built from scratch. "You made me believe I could," she'd said, her voice shy but sure. I'd smiled, handing her a coffee from the shop down the street. "You always could," I told her. "You just needed a spark." She'd grinned and I saw myself in her, not the Lila who'd stood trembling in Nora's bank, but the one who'd walked away stronger. Amelia's article had shifted the tide in Charleston. The silent vault, she called it, a nod to the trust I'd reclaimed and the empire I'd built as Emma Wren. The piece had gone beyond viral, sparking calls for financial reform, with Nora's name tied to every headline. She'd resigned last week, her polished life unraveling in quiet disgrace. Jim had followed, his real estate deals crumbling under scrutiny. I didn't read the details, I didn't need to. Their world wasn't mine anymore, but the ripples of their fall had lifted others. Clara's coding boot camp had a wait list, and my nonprofit scholarship fund had doubled, thanks to donors inspired by Amelia's words. I paused at the Battery's edge, the harbour stretching wide and endless. My phone buzzed in my pocket, Margaret again. Her voicemails had piled up, each one softer, more hesitant than the last. I hadn't listened to them all, but I'd kept her letter, its words etched in my mind. "Break the pattern, Lila." I pulled it from my bag now, the paper worn from being carried too long. I'd spent weeks wrestling with it, wondering if forgiveness meant weakness, or if letting go meant losing something I still needed. Grandpa's note, tucked in that savings book, had given me my answer. Use your heart when they forget who you are. He hadn't meant hold grudges or open doors blindly. He'd meant trust myself to know the difference. I unfolded the letter, rereading Margaret's confession about the lemonade stand, her silence when Nora hurt me. "I thought I was saving us," she'd written, "but I lost you." The words didn't erase the years of absence, but they cracked open a truth. She'd been trapped too, by a family that valued stability over love. I didn't owe her a second chance, but I owed myself the choice. I slipped the letter back into my bag and pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over her number. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. I'd call when I was ready, on my terms, not hers. The sun climbed higher, warming the stones beneath my feet. Hank had texted earlier, inviting me to a low-country boil at his place tonight. Shrimp, corn, and stories about Grandpa. "Bring Clara," he'd added. "She's family now." I smiled, picturing his creaky porch, the laughter that would fill it. Family wasn't just blood. It was the people who saw you, who stayed. Clara, Hank, even Amelia, who'd become a friend over coffee and shared fights for justice. They were my vault, stronger than any trust or empire. I turned back toward the city, my boots steady on the path. Tideshell Holdings was still mine, its billions a tool I'd wield carefully, funding dreams instead of dynasties. Ems Wren would stay in the shadows, but Lila Harper was stepping into the light. I'd withdrawn my silence, and it was enough. The bracelet on my wrist felt lighter. its threads holding not just Grandpa's memory, but my own. I was enough. As I walked, Charleston unfolded around me, street vendors setting up, church bells ringing, the harbor's hum a quiet song. I wasn't running from Nora's world or Margaret's mistakes anymore. I was building my own, brick by brick, spark by spark. The future wasn't a question, it was a choice, and I'd made mine. Have you ever found your own dawn, a moment where you knew you were enough? Share your story in the comments. I want to hear it. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Keep building your vault wherever you are. I hope you enjoyed this story. Subscribe to my channel so you don't miss touching stories. Leave a like and then comment below what you thought of the emotional stories. See you in the next video.